Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage candidate Christine Jones.
Hi, thank you. Hi. I play that because this race has gotten a little bit contentious, and a lot of things have been said, mostly about me. A lot of them aren't true. Yeah. I've learned a lot of things about myself in this race, mostly because most of them aren't true. But I do think it's critical for us to get to the truth. And I appreciate, Shane, the kind invitation to come tonight and to talk to you guys a little bit, because we have an opportunity in this state to do something really profound. And that is to elect leadership who's not part of the establishment. Leadership who speaks the voice of you. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit tonight. I am Christine Jones. I'm a Republican candidate for governor, but I wasn't always a candidate for governor. Not so long ago, I was just a regular citizen sitting in seats like you, listening to other people running for office. And this has been an interesting journey this last 12 months. We've traveled about 40,000 miles all over the state, all 15 counties. We have met thousands of incredible people. Everywhere we go, smart, thoughtful, caring, incredible people in this state. And I am really encouraged about the future. It gives me great hope. Now, when Arizona was seeking status as a state, the Constitutional Convention was started each day with a prayer. And since we're sitting in what I believe to be the former sanctuary of a church, is that right? Did this used to be a church once upon a time? It was, okay. I want to recite a little bit of it. And my colleague who's sitting in the back of the room, Ed, was on staff at my church before I recruited him to come along on this journey with me. And he gave me this book, which collected all of the prayers that were prayed at the beginning of each day when Arizona was seeking status as a state. And on the second day, the Reverend Seaborn Crutchfield, the Constitutional Convention chaplain, prayed, "We pray thee, O Lord, that this body of men, the representatives of the people of the state of Arizona, would adopt such a constitution as would be acceptable to every citizen, and that it would grant unto Arizona statehood and place her among the grand galaxy of states in these United States, and that Arizona would be the brightest star in the Union." Isn't that good? So I read this and I said, Ed, is it possible that a prayer from 1910 would sum up why I'm running for governor in 2014? My husband is a career military officer. You saw a picture of him in that ad. We traveled around the country as a military family for a number of years. And then we landed here in the 90s. The Wallace and Ladmo show. Where did he go? He went out in the lobby. The Wallace and Ladmo show was still in action. And when we came here, we just knew we had found home. We just fell in love with this place. And you know, when you love something, you want it to thrive. You want it to prosper. You want it to flourish. So I'm running for governor because I see that Arizona can be the brightest star in the Union, and I have a plan to make it so. A couple of things that you should know about me if you don't remember anything else as you leave here tonight. One, I am an unapologetic conservative. I am a fierce defender of the Constitution, especially our Second Amendment right to bear arms. And I'm so glad that you don't have passion on this issue, because I'm a little unclear about where you stand on this. But you know, Donnie, the Second Amendment gave us the First, and it gives us the ability to defend and protect against the erosion of all of the others. So if you're going to be a defender of the Constitution, you better stand up for the Second, and the First, and the Fourth, and the Fifth, and the Eighth, and the 10th, and all the other ones. Because that is the very fabric of our foundation, and if we let it go just a little bit, the whole fabric can fade away. The third thing is I abide by a simple set of conservative principles upon which my plan is based. They are very simply economic development, excellence in education, and border security. Together, if we could make some progress on those things, we really could make Arizona, among the grand galaxy of states, the brightest star in the union. Now, I like the question and answer portion of these meetings. It's my favorite part. He's going to ask the first question because he has the mic and he gets the mic privilege. But be thinking of the hardest question you could ask, as we're 2 weeks from Election Day tonight. Besides, I've already heard the speech a few times, so the question part is more interesting to me. Quickly, before, I was just getting you ready, just preparing, just, sort of soak it all in here. Before we get to that, let me quickly just touch on those three things. Economic development, clearly the key to the ongoing growth of the state. I think of it in concentric circles. The local businesses, the businesses that are outside of the state, and the businesses that are outside of the country. When we came here in the 90s, I joined a little law firm downtown, and then I got recruited in 2001 to go to a tiny little startup company with the crazy name GoDaddy. And we started there with just a few dozen people, and over about the next decade, we grew the company to about 4,000 employees, mostly all located right here in Arizona. Great Arizona success story. But to that first inner circle, the local companies, what we have to do is we have to get government out of their way. I joined as the company's first lawyer and executive vice president. Every time I turned around, Don, there was some other roadblock being set up. I could never understand, why are you making it so hard for us to create jobs? We have to get the government out of the way, the small businesses, the people that are in Arizona, who love Arizona, who are devoted to staying here. Streamline the tax code. Stop making small business owners file $0 tax returns in cities where they don't do business. Remove regulatory barriers and statutory barriers to entry. Stop making people wait months and years for permits to start projects. This is getting the government out of the way so that the private sector can create jobs, because what do we know? More jobs leads to more taxpayers, which leads to lower taxes. That's how you raise revenue for the state. The second circle, and this again we learned at GoDaddy, getting outside of the state, and to the companies who would be either growing or relocating anyway, to sit down with CEOs and say, you know what, let me tell you why Arizona is your wisest choice. You hear lots of stories about companies leaving California, flying right over top of Arizona to land and invest and settle in Texas. It's not okay with me. There is no reason those companies really, on the balance, are going to Texas as they do their due diligence and they look at lower taxes, regulatory environment, talent, business environment, all of those things collectively. There's no reason they beat us on any of that if you take the whole totality of the circumstances. The reason those companies go there is because the governor of Texas gets on a plane, flies to Silicon Valley, sits down and says, let me talk to you about why you're gonna come to Texas. And then you know what they do? They go to Texas because he invites them and they come. We gotta go make those deals, and that is something the leadership of this state should do. Now you remember, because you've been around a long time, Governor Fannin did this back in the 50s. Anybody else remember Governor Fannin? Yeah. So he took Barry Goldwater and Carl Hayden, the two US senators, and they went on a road show. They went and visited every aerospace company, every semiconductor company. They built these industry concentrations. It didn't just happen. They did it on purpose, affirmatively, intentionally. That's why we became a center for aerospace and a center for semiconductor. We have to do that again. It's time. Those two things, in addition to facilitating investment from offshore investors, will make Arizona a self-sufficient, financially secure state, one that plans for the future. That is the brightest star. Let's talk about education, because if we are to have all these great jobs, we have to have a pipeline of talent to fill them. And we know at the moment our schools rank somewhere at the bottom of the barrel out of the 50 states. So what do we know? Now, I'm like most of you. I grew up in a very humble home. We didn't have much money. I did have a really smart aunt, my mom's sister, my Aunt Ann. And she always said, you know, Christine, if you want to get out of Southeast Denver, that's where I grew up. Anybody else from Colorado? Okay, so when I say Southeast Denver, do you know what I mean by that? It's not pejorative, it's just an area in Denver that's less affluent. She said, if you want to get out of this neighborhood, you're going to have to take your education seriously. So I did. I became a CPA, I became a lawyer, I worked really hard. But you know what else happened? I got lucky. I grew up in a neighborhood that had a really fine public school system. I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have that great public school education. My parents couldn't afford private school. There was no such thing as a charter. There wasn't online school because there wasn't online. Homeschool hadn't been really even conceived yet. So I don't see why we shouldn't give every child in Arizona the opportunity I had to go to a really fine public school. And then we have to really protect the choice. Because we have, by my measure, probably the finest system of school choice in the country right now. Parents are the best decision maker about where their kids should go to school. All right, so let's be honest with ourselves. If we rank somewhere at the bottom of the barrel, our schools are hardly the brightest star at the moment. But we have 3 of the top 10 high schools in the whole country right here in Arizona. How does that make sense? Some schools are doing really well. Some schools are doing really not well. So I say let's take and repeat and fund those really great models, repeat them into the failing schools, and give these failing schools 2 choices. You either get better or you have to go away. And that's tough, particularly for local representatives who have to go back to constituents and look them in the eye and say, let me tell you why I'm closing down the school in your neighborhood. This is really hard stuff. But we should have a leader. We should be electing leaders who will stand up and call this what it is. Failing is failing, and you only have to improve or go away. Same thing with regard to teachers. We have some of the finest teachers, thousands of incredible teachers all over the state. They come in early, they stay late, they spend their own money, they really care about kids. And then there's the other ones. But I will tell you, if we have 3 of the top 10 schools, we also have some of the worst. Who's teaching your kids matters, right? Some of the schools are doing great, some of the schools aren't. Who's teaching your kids matters? Who's running these schools matters? From a business person's perspective, we have 227 school districts. All of them have their own administration. All of them have a superintendent and an HR department and a payroll department and a legal department, all of the things that you need to run a school district. We're spending an immense amount of money on that. We ought to be getting more money into the classroom, more teachers, smaller student-teacher ratios, more student-teacher aides, more money for curriculum, supplies, the things that you actually need to impart knowledge to children. Okay, this is where we get to Common Core. Now, my mom always said, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Which makes it really awkward when you're giving a speech and you get to the part about Common Core. So let's put it this way. When my husband retired from the military, he became a high school teacher. He's in his 13th year teaching at Chandler High School. Here's the problem with Common Core and why I don't support it. The first thing is it has taken a disproportionately large percentage of classroom time away from teachers to just comply with standards, leaving them a very small amount of time to actually teach. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I firmly believe that if you're going to graduate from the 12th grade in Arizona, you should actually know something.
Yes.
I know it's clever, but I think if you're going to not just read, you ought to be able to do math, the kind of math I put in my commercial, the kind where you actually do math. Who talked to me about this before we started? About the matrix thing, and I mean this madness. Okay. So that's the first problem with Common Core. But the second problem, and the biggest problem to me as a defender of the Constitution, is federalizing school standards, giving over control of our education to some bureaucrat sitting 2,500 miles away in Washington who's never stepped foot in an Arizona classroom is not the way to educate Arizona kids. We just have to get serious about this. So what do? Standards are good. We should be measuring performance. High standards are better. We have to have an academically rigorous environment for these kids. And yet, they're not fungible, right? They're not commodities. They're little human beings and they need to be taught as individuals. So these standards should be established in our state and they should be applied at a local level by teachers who actually teach. I know, again, it's clever. It's thrifty of me to think of these things.
Common sense.
But honestly, couldn't you just apply a little common sense to this? Yeah. like I said, hardly the brightest at the moment, but we have such an opportunity to provide the finest education by taking some of these great models, both in charter schools and public schools, and give every single kid the chance I had. Because somewhere tonight, there is a scrappy little freckle-faced, red-headed kid, and she's gonna be standing here in 40 years running for governor. And I don't know who she is or where she is, but doggone it, let's give her the chance to succeed. Okay, now, let's talk about border security quickly. This is by far the biggest issue we get all over the state. Everybody wants to talk about the border. I've published a very detailed border security plan, which is based on many hours of conversations I've had with the Border Patrol, Customs, law enforcement, military, even the cattlemen and the produce growers, the Farm Bureau, people that exist at the border, to say, what can we do about this? Because coming to this not having run for office before and just looking at this like you would look at it, it didn't seem all that complicated to me. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Didn't seem all that hard to fix. So I said, all right, let's just go spend time down there and figure out what we're gonna do. All right, here's what I've had to acknowledge. If I'm being honest and doing this with integrity, which I commit to do, we have to say, immigration policy is federal policy. We wish we could snap our fingers and fix it because it's not that hard, but this is to the Congress to fix. So what we do there is we engage diplomatically with the federal government in Mexico, because part of this is their problem, with the federal government in Washington, and with our congressional delegation. I submit to you we might want to think about a different federal delegation for us as a place to start. That's for immigration policy, but let's talk about border security specifically, because that is something where we as a state can make a difference. We can secure the border, and I'm suggesting that we can't afford not to any longer. So what my plan calls for is 1,200 troops at the border in uniform with keeping and bearing arms. They act in a support capacity for local law enforcement. Civilian law enforcement have the authority to arrest and incarcerate criminals who are breaking the law. The laws I'm talking about enforcing are state laws, so we don't have to get crosswise with the federal government who keep bashing us down because we're trying to enforce immigration law. God forbid we would want to do that. But let's enforce the law that we can, okay? Let's use technology, and by the way, there are readily available technologies we can put in place to help monitor who's coming and going. The monitoring piece is really critical because we know about 50% of the people who are in the country illegally are here illegally because they've overstayed a visa. They come legally and they stay illegally. We have to know who's coming and going so that we can fix that piece. And then we have to finish the fence in strategic areas. We don't need the Great Wall of Mexico. Every expert I've talked to agrees on this. What we need is to finish the fence in critical high traffic smuggling lanes. Because the problem that we're talking about today is trafficking. There is almost zero illegal immigration where we're talking about men and women walking across a line on a map. It hardly ever happens. What this is organized crime. People are being brought across the border by coyotes. They're put in danger. They pay a lifetime savings amount of money to do it, and the cartels are running these smuggling rings. This is something we have to fix as a state, because the highest goal of me as governor is to provide a stable, safe, and secure environment for the citizens of this state. There is no safety in allowing free trespass to smuggling rings. And this trafficking is not just people. It's drugs, it's dangerous goods, God forbid it's terrorists, sex. It's all of the things that you can put in a backpack and carry across the border. Can you imagine one of these times, one of these backpacks that's full of drugs isn't full of drugs anymore? It's full of the ingredients for a dirty bomb. God forbid. We cannot let that happen anymore. Now, I've said we should seek reimbursement from the federal government, and I think we should. It's their job. And this is the whole irony. What happened to Shane? This is the whole irony of the 10th Amendment. They take over everything that they're not supposed to take over. There are no enumerated powers for Common Core in education, or Obamacare with medicine, or the EPA for the environment, or the BLM managing land, or even the IRS for taxation. Doesn't exist. The one thing they're supposed to do, the one thing that we have reserved to the federal government to take care of, border security, they don't do. This is their job. But what I'm saying is we can't afford not to do this anymore. We spend $2.8 billion every year to educate, incarcerate, and provide medical services for people who are citizens of other countries. I'm suggesting we'll take about 10% of that, get the border secure, and start to return some of that money either to other budget lines like education or back to the taxpayers who are paying it to begin with. That I think we have to do. Together, economic development, excellence in education, border security. Let's make Arizona, among the grand galaxy of states, the brightest star in the union.